I think what Americans don't realize is the effect that they do actually have on the rest of the world.
They don't know
and
that.
this is like your everyday Americans. I think I mentioned, I can't remember if I've already mentioned this tonight on the podcast or if it was something I mentioned to you earlier in person. But a friend of mine, we were discussing the American election, the upcoming American election, and she said, it really annoys me. She's an American who lives in Australia currently. And she said, it really annoys me when I see Australians going and sticking their nose into the election and saying, who are you to talk about my politics? But America is so influential throughout the world that we all have a vested interest in who's living in the White House.
It's almost like we've earned the right to vote as well. I
don't think that'll ever happen, and I probably wouldn't even say that. But we have a right.
But I believe that from what you're saying, they do have, and I agree with you. They have a massive influence, and that's why we're so concerned.
Exactly. That's why there should be no question that we should be able to go onto Twitter or Facebook or anything, social media, or within our own proper media, and say, you know what, this is what's happening in America. I don't agree with this. I urge my American friends to go out and vote for a better America. They'll
tell us to get stuffed.
They will, but that is our right, because what happens in America affects us without a doubt.
But they don't know that.
I don't know if they know that or they refuse to acknowledge that. They do. I agree. They 100%. They've got their democracy. It's the best democracy in the world, and they don't want anyone to fuck with it.
Isn't it funny, though? Isn't that ironic?
It is ironic. It's 100% ironic. We're going to spread democracy like it's the coronavirus, but you can't tell us how to do it. We're going to deal with it our own way. And if we want to have 200,000 people die for our democracy, then they'll fucking die.
See, look, I'm a very, like you, I am very compassionate, humane, and I would hate to be an American having lost someone to corona.
Can you imagine living in New York? New York, which is widely regarded as the greatest city in the world. And you're literally having mass graves built because you cannot care for all the dead and all the ill. That is horrific, and that is not indicative of a first world nation, let alone the self-proclaimed greatest nation in the world, is it? How can you call yourself the greatest nation in the world, the pioneers of democracy and freedom in the Western world, and have to dig mass graves for your people because you are too arrogant to understand that universal health care is of benefit to everyone?
It's funny, you've mentioned a couple of things already. So we've whether or not, like you, I can't remember because we've had an interesting conversation today and yesterday, and I'm thinking we've discussed many issues, but all the primary concerns that we have with the United States, like their obsession with weapons. Now, I'm going to generalize, but there is a massive obsession.
Oh, there is.
Generally speaking, I don't know what the figure might be.
I don't think there's an American who would disagree with the fact that America has an affinity for guns.
So we've got that.
Yeah.
We've got this arrogant approach to almost anything that make, to us, common sense. All we are asking, for example, just wear a mask, and that will help the world. That not only will it help you, but it will help the world, because we need you guys to get yourselves in order so we can just continue on with what we need to do. Just wear a mask. We in Australia have shut down, it took a little bit, but we shut down an entire nation. And just like the United States is 52 states, we've got seven. Sorry. We've got Tasmania all the time. And
plus a territory.
6 plus a territory.
Oh, a couple of territories.
Yeah, but to boil it down, we basically agreed that, okay, we're just going to shut it down and see, and let's deal with it.
And it wasn't pleasant, was it?
No, it wasn't pleasant.
The lockdown was pretty horrible, but we did it because we knew we had to.
Yeah, and I live in 2 states, so it was even worse for me because I experienced it twice as much as most people. And look, I understand the complexity of shutting down 52 states. I get that. But there's something that I've always believed. We were talking about Democrats and Republicans. My belief is everyone's forgotten that they're just Americans.
Yep.
Don't get divided.
Well, they have divided themselves.
They've divided themselves.
That is 100% the issue.
The only recovery plan that they could possibly have, whoever becomes president or whoever has enough common sense should say, listen, you know what? I have been elected. I'm a president now. But the truth is, we're all Americans. I'm representing the United States.
Okay, well, let me put this to you.
Including Republicans, including Democrats.
Yeah, so let me put this to you. Like a week ago was the presidential election, right? The presidential debate. And, it was notorious because it was essentially a massive clusterfuck.
Historic. I've never seen anything like it.
Trump was bullying Biden and the moderator. He was talking over both of them to the point that the moderator, who was a conservative moderator, mind you, from Fox News, was asking Trump to be quiet and to let everyone talk. It was a clusterfuck. And Biden was as magnanimous as he could be in that situation. I think he told Trump to shut up. And that was the most extreme he got from Biden, which, I mean, if I was in Biden's shoes, I would have been saying a lot worse to Trump. But then less than a week later, Trump gets rushed to hospital because he's been infected with COVID-19.
Supposedly, yeah.
Okay, so regardless of, any theories about whether it's real or not, let's assume
the fact that
for the narrative that he got infected.
The fact that I even said supposedly, and I'm not trying to cut in, but the fact that I even said supposedly implies that even the most basic, is he or isn't he? Has he or has he not paid tax?
Is this political spin?
Has he or not touched someone's pussy?
Yeah.
Has he or has he not? I mean, it's just absurd.
It is. You shouldn't have to be asking those things of a sitting president.
This is the president of the most powerful nation on this planet. Yeah. It is the most powerful. And I hope they can get it together. Yeah. I just don't think that Trump can actually do it.
Going back to what we're talking about, so Trump gets coronavirus, whether or not he did doesn't matter. He gets coronavirus, right? You have Biden, Kamala Harris, the vice presidential nominee, and numerous other Democratic senators and seat holders and all of that coming forward and going, you know what? Best wishes for the president. I hope you recover. We don't want this. We don't wish this on anyone. Now, hypothetically, let's turn the tables. Let's imagine Joe Biden got coronavirus and Trump wasn't. Do you think Trump would have been that magnanimous?
Well, Trump actually said a good Democrat is a dead Democrat.
So he would not have been.
That's your answer.
He would have immediately used that. He would have gone on attack. He would have said, this man is not fit to be president. He got coronavirus. How can you vote for this man? That's exactly what Trump would have done. And he would have done it in a much more immature way than that. So I think straight away there you go, right, there is actually a bit of decency there. Not on Trump's side, on the other side.
Yeah.
Biden is a man who wants to heal the rift. Don't think he's going to be able to do it personally.
But why?
I think he'll try.
See, this is where I lose it with them. Americans we in Australia, it's our duty to vote.
It's legally have to.
You legally have to.
We're legally
but we
required
actually
by law
see it
to
as
vote.
a duty. I think that we've now been not convinced, but we've been conditioned to understand that, my vote actually counts. I do have a say. I have an opportunity to speak with one tick, right? I don't know what happened to Americans that they don't vote. I don't know why they don't vote. I still don't understand that. Now and just they've been told and it's been made clear, if you guys do not vote now, this is I think in all American elections, this is the time that we are going to see the greatest number of votes.
Well, I think that's
people voting.
I think there was during the Democratic primaries. I think there was already a record number of
Which is
people
fantastic.
voting, which is awesome.
Because that means that you guys are now making a choice.
Yeah, but from my perspective, bringing up the Democratic primaries, that's another issue with American politics, and something that we don't experience in Australia because we don't nominate or vote as voters who is going to lead each party. So my issue with the American political system is that they do have these Democratic and Republican primaries where you have to go out and vote for who you want to represent the Democratic Party and who you want.
The charisma vote.
Yeah. So essentially, the way that the American political system or presidential political system is engineered, it is completely biased to the sitting president, whether that president is Democratic or Republican, because that sitting president has no opposition to whether or not he's his or her party's nominee, right? Whereas the opposition party has to go through this whole rigmarole where all of the Democratic candidates are slinging shit at each other. You know, Bernie Sanders wanted to take down Joe Biden, you know, Kamala Harris wanted to take them both down, so on, so on. And so it ended up being a shit-slinging match between people who were largely affiliated with one another. They all shared the same vision.
Yeah.
But because they wanted to be the presidential nominee, they had to battle it out. So, of course, during that whole process, the sitting president from the opposition party is then going to go, look at these guys, they can't get their shit together. Look at them, they're a mess.
It's sad.
So if Trump wasn't who he was and wasn't so prone to putting his foot in his mouth and sprouting the shit that he sprouts, who would vote for Joe Biden? This is why someone like George W. Bush was able to win 2 terms.
Sadly, I get it. That's the fact that I get what you're saying and I understand it is sad. Firstly, in Australia, if our Prime Minister, prior to becoming a Prime Minister, had said, I touched them by the pussy or whatever the quote was,
his party
would he have become a Prime Minister?
No, because his party would not have
But why
put him
is
in that position.
Because we would have rejected him because it's repugnant and rude and not to our standard.
Well, that's not why their party wouldn't have elected him. That's not why. We as people would probably see that, but that's not why their party would go, that person is not the best person to lead us to victory.
Yeah.
They're a liability.
Absolutely.
Whereas you don't have that with the American political system.
That's right.
Because you're voting for the person, not for the party.
You know what? If they can vote for, if they can riot or protest for Black Lives Matter, for not wearing masks, for the freedom to carry weapons, why don't they get up and say, you know what? This is not good enough. We are Americans. We deserve better than this. Now,
I largely think that's what the Black Matter protests are about. Black Lives Matter, sorry.
But that's only one component. There are so many components.
There was a lot more to it than just that. That was the flag that was what they marched under, but it was more than that.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like, the way black people are treated in America is obvious. Maybe it's not as visible to Americans, but from our perspective, from an external perspective, it's pretty blatant.
It is.
And it's pretty horrible.
But you know what? America is now demonstrating everything that the rest of the world does not want to be. That is what America is.
100%.
It's like, if you're going to write a book on how not to run a country or not to be, that's it. That's the best example. To some degree, that's why I said earlier, I hope they crumble. I don't want them to crumble. I have friends and we're caught in the middle because one, you said it perfectly. China eats dogs. America, there's hope though. There's hope. They might just by the skin of their teeth, they may just find the morality and common sense to get their shit together.
I agree. I genuinely don't think that there will ever be a president as extreme in their inability to be a president as Trump has been.
Yeah.
I think if Biden wins, Biden will win for the next 2 terms. I mean, I think I don't know even if he's going to last 2 terms because he's quite old. But
yeah,
I think the Democratic Party, if they win this term, they'll win another term. But after that, even if the Republicans then gain the White House again, we're not going to see a president like Trump, which is a good thing. Even if there is another Republican president in there in 8 years' time or in 4 years' time, then they're not going to be as divisive and as damaging as what Trump has been. They can't be.
I think Trump has pretty much unveiled the true face of America in many ways. Because...
but don't forget, Trump was not elected on the popular vote because of the electoral college system. 3 million more Americans voted for Hillary Clinton than they voted for Donald Trump. And because of the electoral college system, Trump was still able to get in. So literally, he became president through a technicality.
Let's say you're okay. So I'm just trying to find, because I'm desperate. I have children just as you.
Mm-hmm.
The impact could have a domino effect. We're not going to live forever, and we would like our children
want to leave
have
a better world.
Very better world for our children, right? So I was incredibly annoyed when, in the middle of a pandemic, the United States was still encouraging Australia to go and face up to China. Because of the South Island.
To put political pressure on China,
They were encouraging a long-distance war. They were encouraging a proxy war, basically, as they normally do, because they're cowards. They if they can avoid conflict where there's no money to be made, they will do it a proxy style. If they are going to make money, they will instigate a war so they can sell it to both nations. They will sell weapons to both nations, right? But in our particular case, and we mentioned before, is that in our region, Australasia, we are the equivalent to America in Asia.
Yeah, in Oceania.
Oceania, sorry.
Yeah.
China is a big ally of ours, which America is underestimating.
Absolutely. I mean, before Trump, China was not an ally per se, but they had a very big trade relationship with America, which Trump has done everything he can to damage. So I think China was very much a nation that were like, hey, we're here, we're open for business, let's do business. And I don't think that we'll ever, from a cultural perspective, necessarily be on the same page as China, the same way that we are with America.
Yeah.
But I think from a business perspective, the relationship is...
I just thought of something, because I'm trying to come up with some kind of what happens now, what do we do, and what do we hope for, and what does the future look like? Let's say, for example, you were the president.
Yep.
You were nominated president of the United States today. What would you do in order to fix all of it? And there's a big list. So you would have to prioritize what am I going to do first?
Well, I think you have to get your own house in order first, don't you? Like, I think you have to start by mending the bridge, the gulf between the two different sides of America.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would do that, but I think that's what any president has to do at this point in time.
Do they start a war?
No.
In order to bring them together?
No.
Which is what they normally do?
That's something that Trump might try to do.
I'm just asking because it's not something you would do. I know that because I know you, and it's not something you would do. You wouldn't go down that path. No.
It comes down to reconciliation. It comes down to conciliation. It comes down to compromise. It's like any relationship. A marriage is largely... A successful marriage largely comes down to the ability to compromise and communicate. And I think that is something that America has lost the ability to do, is to compromise and to communicate. Because doesn't matter whether we're talking 5 years from now or 50 years from now or 500 years from now, if countries are still a thing in 500 years. But there's always going to be differences of opinion. We're always going to have two sides of every argument. At least two sides of every argument, I suppose. So what we have to learn to do, what America has to learn to do, is to not necessarily agree to disagree, because there are certain things that I don't think you can justify agreeing to disagree on. Racism is obviously one, homophobia is one, misogyny, all of that kind of thing. You can't compromise there. But I think by and large, people are unwilling to compromise on the things that you should be able to compromise on.
So how would you do it though? I mean,
well, I mean,
you now, I'm not saying Fox News, but you've now got every TV channel on the planet pointing at you, every TV channel in the United States now pointing at you. Travis, what are you going to say? What are you going to say to make it better?
Well, I don't think it... See, the whole issue is I don't think you can just say something to make it better. I don't think you can just off the top of your head figure out a solution. This is something that's going to require years, possibly decades of work. Yeah. It's something that you're going to have policies before you're even elected into that position, whether it's a policy to defund the police and refund more social work to help prevent crimes in lieu of the police, or whether it's a case of criminalizing police brutality, whether it's a case of criminalizing racism and bigotry.
It's about time we found